I can start. Well, it all starts with the script and the director, and you go from the script and read the script and become familiarized with the story, and then the director comes and say, well, okay, this is the story, and we're going to try to say this with this story, or we're going to try to have this story told in this manner and emphasize this aspect of the story. So basically, I like to call the directors a captain of the boat, and we are the lieutenants, and that's where the collaboration starts.
Yeah, I would say. And what's great about theater is, unlike a movie that gets filmed and it is what it is, and you can watch it over and over, and it's always the same. You might see something different this time you're watching it, but it's pretty much still the same movie. With theater, it's always different. The script stays the same, but it's the interpretation. And it's these three, along with the sound designer, that work together to really make it a different serving this time. So it looks different, or maybe feels different, or responds to the script in a way that's a little more accessible to the audience.
I might add to that you know, for Professor Ciupe, he's looking at the environment that these characters or the story will take place in, and perhaps the costume designer is looking more closely at the characters and how they relate to one another in the larger framework of the story. And for us, in lighting, we look at it, we might read the script the first time just for pleasure, and then the second time, on the second read, we're looking for either, if it's realistic, the times of day in the piece, what is the quality of light, where are the emotional peaks and valleys, which I mentioned as well. We're looking for the changes, and how does the play happen over time, and its flux, and then how does that support what the other designers do?
I would add also that we all complement each other's work. We create an environment, we create a world, and a space without people in it that are dressed appropriately, that fit that word, and without the proper light that creates the atmosphere, won't serve the play. And I think this is our goal. By collaborating and keeping us posted on any development that we might make in each of the areas, we kind of help the collaboration move along.
How do you actually talk to each other? Do you use images, terminology? How do you actually communicate?
Well, for me, I try to use as many images as possible. They might be rough sketches. If it's a modern piece, it's probably better for me to just grab the JCPenney catalog or Brooks Brothers mail order catalog and LL Bean catalog and just sort of pull things together of what people might be wearing. If it were raining, they might have this kind of raincoat. If it was cold, they'd have this kind of sweater. And that kind of image gathering. If it's a period piece and I'm thinking that the silhouette is large, or the women's dresses have large petticoats or hoops or something, and both the set designer and lighting designer need to know that there's going to be that kind of volume of fabric to light up and to let through doorways and that sort of thing. So I try to let them know where my mind is right from the beginning as far as the silhouettes are concerned.
Well, in lighting, I think we're tracking several different things at once, and so we're doing a lot of listening, and then we're also listening to ourselves as how these pieces are going to fall together. We can come at it through imagery, which for me personally, photography works well, which shows a quality of light, and it's a lot about composition. Or it could be metaphorical. We have a show right now, for example, I'm giving an example, where the lighting designer's metaphor for the show was a nebula, which provided for color, shape, and it actually then translated into aspects of the show. So sometimes it comes in a metaphoric way, sometimes it comes in a realistic way, and then also through words, through vocabulary that evoke an image. If you can be descriptive, oftentimes I have a designer go through a script and I call it, look for imagistic words in the script and pull them out of the play that the playwright has used, and then what does that conjure? You know, and then go find that, and then bring that in and see what kind of a response you get.
I personally I don't like to use the complicated terminology because that even makes the things even more harder to be defined. I try to communicate as simple and as clear as possible so I don't mislead any of the team members in what I'm going to provide at the end. So that means color, which I'm going to try to stay true to through the process, models that shows the three-dimensional aspect of the space, renderings, and I would try to do some storyboarding, which means that's how the space would transform during the show for each, if it's a multi-set show, and so on. So I try to be truthful to that because I know that costume designer depends on my color scheme. I know the lighting designer depends on that, and where he's going to put the fixtures. So for me, the most important thing is how to communicate clear and not to miscommunicate.
Yeah. And that's always a problem because words are not really all that precise. So images help. Also knowing the other person for a while and sharing the ideas, and then, do you understand what I mean? Like, he'll say this color, and I go, I need to see it. So he'll give me a swatch of fabric, or he'll say it's going to be this material. Give me paint chip, and then I can then explain. Then I can put the light on it. Is that going to work?
Sure.
And so it's that back and forth.
It's an interesting situation we're in because we're visual artists who support the performing arts. So we have to use visuals as much as possible because that's what the medium by which we're going to use do our jobs. And I try not to be too specific too soon, but when I show things, I try to be as clear about where my mind is. And it takes me a while sometimes to make up my mind about what it actually is going to be, but quite often their response to things, what might be problematic or what seems like a good idea or the direction to head, they direct me as much as the director does in those decisions.
I'll give you an example in terms of timeline. Probably the last thing most lighting designers get to is color, because I will procrastinate that to the last minute because I'm waiting to see the finished paint if I can. I'm waiting to feel those costumes, see what those colors look like, and then in the performance as well. What I might have thought at the beginning of the process is an appropriate mood, because color does so much for mood and emotion, may be very different by a week before we open the show, and so the color order goes in at the last minute. And then, of course, that's the easiest thing to change if we might find. It's an art, not a science. I mean, there's science there, but it's an art, and we are always kind of experimenting to a certain, particularly in lighting, to a certain degree.
I think it's very also important to mention here that the hardest thing is to communicate with the director, because we are all trained in some kind of art, fine visual arts, so it's easier for me to tell to Paul, for example, Paul, I'm going to use cold colors, cold subdued colors. I'm not going to use very strong hues and so on. And I'm going to do dark shades and whatever. And I can give him terminology that for a director might not appeal at all or might not make any sense. So I think the most important thing is to communicate to the director and make sure that he understands what you're trying to do and how you try to help the show by using texture, basically texture, shape, and volume. So.
That's a really important thing, is to make sure that the director knows you want nothing more than to help her or him do this show, that you're not the enemy, that you're really trying to help. So I think that's why I bring as many ideas as possible, so that they can help me. Because it can be anything. It could be anything at all. So you really have to make some decisions.
Yeah, I think that's a key point. I think I'd add to what Professor Ciupe and Professor Favini are saying about vocabulary. People use different words for different things. And I could say to Paul, here, go make me a cup of coffee and make it beige. And he's going to put some certain amount of milk in there. And well, that's not really beige to me. What's beige to you? And so that need for specificity at a certain point where the language becomes universal, like you understand each other. And that takes time, but it also, so as you enter this project, be patient, and listen real carefully, take good notes, and then when you think you have it, either reiterate it in different words or show it through image, so the person goes, no, that's not what I really meant. I was doing this last night with T's. I had a point I wanted to make and it didn't quite get across. And then the second time I said, oh, now I see what you mean. So be patient with yourselves, gentle with yourselves, and then allow that communication to evolve.
There's another thing that just came to my mind, and I found it very interesting through my career, is that every single director is different. And every single director would understand easier through some kind of a different path what you're trying to explain. So some will understand better models, some won't get it through the models, would get it only through maybe a rendering, or maybe just taking him downstairs and showing in the real space what he's going to get. That's from the set perspective point of view. I don't know about costumes or light, but I'm sure that it's the same issue, that you have to find the proper channel of communication that works for that specific individual.
Sure. I'm a big fan of Post-its. If I use images, I usually put a Post-it on it that says, I love this attitude, or I love the color of this dress, just so that they know I'm excluding other parts of it. I'm just using it for one particular source. And that helps too. So sometimes the words are as important as the visual.
So, in continuing with this theme of making sure that you communicate clearly, what happens if other designers or the director don't understand your ideas? How do you address that?
Well, if they don't understand the ideas that I'm presenting to them, then there's probably a real problem with the audience understanding. And so I haven't been clear enough, or I need to be crystal clear, or perhaps I need to rely on these two to say to me, well, I can make that work because, and they might have an answer to that. But you have to be responsive, and you have to be willing to see things a different way. You're not much of a designer if you only see things one way.
Yeah, I think that's hitching your wagon to an idea and not being willing to evolve or shift can really get you in trouble. And I was going to add too that sometimes directors and people learn in different ways. Some people are visual, some people hear, some people have to touch. So they, like Mihai was saying, they all have a different way of understanding, and you have to somehow try and ferret that out of the person you're working with so that you can then communicate in a way that they get it. But I think that when it's not clear, in lighting anyway, we'll change the color, or we'll move the focus, or we'll ask the director, can you move the person a little bit stage right so we can get the light just right? And if you've built a good foundation, like Paul said about, they understand that you want to help it, make it good, then people will then won't be so attached to their thing. And that's a delicate diplomatic dance that we all do, and you will do in your project, I'm sure.
It involves a lot of diplomacy. But my personal opinion about that if you stick with what we just said, try to stay clear, try to be extremely crystal clear on what you're going to provide, and make sure that the director understands that there are very rare situations in which you're going to hit a place where the director won't understand or be surprised when he's going to see the product. And if that's happening, let's assume that that's happening. In my career, it happens very few times. You know, you try to make the changes while you can, if you can, and if it doesn't involve a lot of money. And if not, you're going to have to live with it. It's not brain surgery. Nobody's going to die. Another show is going to come. So, but always do your best so you don't hit that place. So.
I might add one differentiation between my colleagues in that when we get to the last week of the show, pretty much the set is there. And when we get to dress rehearsal, the costumes for the most part are there. And for us, in some ways, we're just starting. So in that last week, we are in there trying to make that all work because we can't really bring the fabric into the design meeting like the costumes on account or the model. So we have to really kind of build the trust early on, and also then be willing to kind of, that's not working, or work real fast, or take the feedback from my colleagues, you know, which I'm sure I'll be getting plenty of this week, you know, to kind of get the show where it needs to go. And there's one little, it's one difference in that most people understand scenery because they live in architecture and they open doors and windows, and most people understand clothing because they wear it. Lighting, most people hit a switch. So there's a different level of kind of how is it going to behave on stage. And some directors understand it better than others.
If these students doing this project, they're going to get to that technical situation, you might... I would answer other questions like, where's the light coming from?
Right.
Are they practical things? Is it
time of day?
Yeah. Is there a Bud Light sign in the room? So
Right.
There are other
That's
ideas
true.
that you can come up with that you can contribute before you get to that point. But that's why what you mentioned is why I think your job is the hardest, because there is definitely a specific timeline on when you have to be done.
Yeah, the curtain is going up. And Paul makes a good point that in this project, which is relatively simple, that you don't need, the best lighting is simple. It's not a lot of technology. It can be a flashlight. It can be a candle. It can be what time of day is it, and where does the light come from. Go outside and look. Spend time looking at a sunset. See what the moon looks like. Open your eyes to what is the light in any given moment, and then look at the piece you're working on. Okay, what is the mood? It's quite that simple. And then how do you translate that mood to a lighting quality, whether it's color, angle, and you can read that in your text, I'm sure.
Sure.
That's what those qualities are.
Is there anything else you'd like to share with the TAT 2000 students about collaboration?
The show comes and goes, but people shouldn't. So you should always make sure that you're staying friends with the people you're working with. And if there's something that you feel like that failed in the experience, talk about it. Absolutely talk about it. Make notes for yourself about how you could have been better, and talk to your colleagues about what more you would have expected, because these should be building experiences about engaging one another and getting to know one another, so that the next show is that much easier and that much more successful. It's very difficult working with new people, and it's great when you work with people you've worked with before who you enjoy working with.
Yeah, have fun, build a relationship, and
I think we are very fortunate that we have the opportunity to play in this field. It's a playing field.
We get paid to experiment and play.
Sure, it's a lot of work, but that's another thing, is if you're really driven by the project to see it, I always want to see it. I always like see that 3 yards of fabric and I think, somebody's going to cut that up and sew it into something I drew, and then it's going to exist, and somebody's going to walk around in it. I want to see that. So if you can stay excited about things like that, despite the hard work, it's really satisfying.
I totally agree. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing. And I think that's what we are doing.
That's it. It's passion for it, and I can't imagine myself doing anything else.
And if you can, you should probably do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it sure ain't the money.
Get out of that video there.